Welcome back to Podcast Recovery, everybody. We are your hosts, David O.
And Carly R.
And today we are joined by our special guest, Heather. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Doing well. Where are you from, Heather?
I'm from Indianapolis originally, and I met my husband when I was living out in Annapolis, Maryland.
Oh, cool.
He was in the Navy, and with the Navy, we've lived all over the country. So he was in the Navy for 30 years. He did Department of Defense for 4, and then we retired back to Indiana, but we live in the southern part of the state in a log cabin in the middle of the woods.
That sounds amazing.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So when were you first introduced to recovery?
I was first introduced to recovery when my mom went into the hospital back in probably would have been 1988 or 89, and she had pancreatitis and she almost died.
Ooh.
And I vividly remember the doctor coming out to talk to us. I was probably 19 at that point, and he said, if your mother doesn't stop drinking, she's going to die. And I was like, I could not understand what he was talking about, because in my mind, my mom didn't have a drinking problem. So I couldn't figure out why he was saying that. But my mom obviously knew, and she started going to AA, like almost immediately. And my mom got sober, and she still is. She'll have 33 years in September.
That's awesome.
And at that point, I was briefly living with her. I've been on my own since I was 17. I'm 52 now. So, and I kind of raised myself between, the type of family I grew up in. And so when she got sober, I was still drinking and using drugs and running the streets. And she nicely asked me to leave the house again, and said that I was affecting her sobriety, and I had to find other accommodations, which I did. But she went on a year-long campaign to try and convince me that AA was the answer to all my problems. And I just thought she was out of her mind. I thought she was nuts. And it really turned me off, because she became like a preacher for AA. But she was planting seeds unbeknownst to me, and I was somehow subconsciously, absorbing that message. And there did come a day where I really did have a moment of clarity, where I thought, if I keep doing this, I'm going to die. And I did reach out to her, and I said, what do I have to do? And she sent me the name and number of a young lady there, and I was living in Maryland at this point. She sent me a name and number of a young lady who lived not far from me, and she was about 21, 22, about my age. And she'd been sober about a year, and she came and picked me up and took me to a meeting.
Nice. And how long have you been clean?
31 years. In June it'll be 32, God willing.
That's awesome. All right. Well, with all that out of the way, take it back over and share your story with us.
Well, I got sober at a really young age, and at the time that was kind of unusual. There was a group of, it's not nowadays, there's a lot of young people that are in treatment. But back then there was a small handful of us in the rooms of AA that were, I knew a girl that was 17, and then there were, some people that were in their early 20s, and we all got sober together. And oddly enough, we're all still sober today, which is kind of amazing. When when you know the statistics about recovery, it's kind of amazing. But I got sober because I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. I was a binge drinker. I was a blackout drinker. I did very risky and dangerous things when I was drinking. God knows what I did when I was blacked out. There were times when I would start on a Thursday night and come to on a Saturday, and I'd be 200 miles from home and have no idea how I got there.
That's not a short distance. 200 miles that's a long way.
Well, in Maryland, you can go from Annapolis to the Eastern Shore.
Yeah.
And that was a typical drive for a lot of us to go to the beach. But to not know how you got that far or who you were with when you woke up, that was pretty scary.
Yeah.
I'd been exposed to alcohol my whole life. My mom is an alcoholic, and my dad, I don't know, but my parents divorced at 4, and every single party at my dad's house, which there were a lot of them, involved very heavy drinking. And so, people say, when did you start? And I say, well, I was in diapers the first time I had a Pabst Blue Ribbon beer.
Wow.
Because I have pictures, of my younger brother and I in diapers behind the bar, drinking my dad's beer.
Wow.
That my parents, thought was cute at the time. And so alcohol was just such a part of our life, and the dysfunction that comes along with that was just how life was. I did not know there was anything other than that. I never knew other people didn't live the way that we lived. We lived with my mom. We moved once a year, whether we needed to or not, because my mom just was always running, for that geographical cure. There was no stability. There was no, there was nothing that you would want to give to a child that would help them grow up into a healthy, functional adult. My mom did love us. My dad did love us. But there was a lot of neglect that went on. And within that neglect, for a young girl, you can imagine the things that might happen to someone. And so by the time I was 21, I was really, pounding away, really in an effort to self-medicate for depression and probably PTSD. But we didn't talk about that back then. That was not terminology back in 1989 and 90 that people were talking about. No one was open about recovery. We were still hiding in our rooms who we were on the outside. So, I didn't know that's what I had been doing, but, for my whole life, I had used one substance or another, whether it was food or sugar, or I would read compulsively, anything I could do to escape reality. And as I got older, that became alcohol and drugs. And so I was done. That last time I woke up that far from home, I was on the Eastern Shore, Maryland, and I was in what looked like a trap house of some sort. Yeah, and it terrified me. And that's when I reached out to my mom and said, what do I have to do? And it took 10 more days for me to, really ponder, is this what I want to do? And then on June 23rd of 1990, I went into an AA meeting. That was a Monday night. It was a 12-step meeting, which eventually became my home group. And I sat down and I listened, and I just never stopped going. And from that day to this, I have not had a drink or a drug. And fortunately for me, I got a very good sponsor who attached herself to me. Her name was Boston Jan, and Jan had been sober for a long time at that point, and she was probably the same age as my mom, but she ran a hard program. There was none of this fluff of, you can go to one meeting a week or two, whatever works for you. Sobriety is whatever you call it. There's a path for every. No, she didn't believe in any of that crap. She was like, 90 meetings, 90 days. You better be bleeding, or that's your only excuse.
Yeah.
You call me every day. You cut your old friends, your old places, no excuses. And she immediately started working with me on the steps. And she was very, very strict. And I really had never had anybody in my life that was strict like that. I was raised by my mom, and my mom was she raised us to be independent. Let's put it that way. And sorry, I have dogs.
No, that's fine. We have dogs around here too, so we get it.
So she really was, she was the one that really saved me really from myself, because let me shut this door. Because she just made sure that I stayed on the path that, in her mind, AA had laid out for us to get sober. And it worked. You know, that saying you hear in the rooms, if any of you are 12 steppers, it works if you work it.
Yep.
And people throw that around nowadays, like, it works if you work it, you know, like it's a joke. But it really does. If you work the program of AA, even if you don't like the spirituality part of it, let's say you're an atheist. Well, AA was built to appeal to atheists. It's built so that spirituality can be whatever it is to you. But if you really work and examine yourself and make a list and, you know, make amends where possible, and, you know, you really follow the things that's laid out in the big book, for me anyway, I'm talking for myself.
Yeah.
You know, if I sat in those meetings, I went to a meeting every single day for 11 years.
Wow.
Except for the days that I do have children, so there were times when I was in the hospital, you know, giving birth. Recovery, things like that. But for 11 years, every single day, and some days I went twice a day. And the reason was because my head was so screwed up.
Yeah.
You know, I was not a normal person. I was not healthy. You know, she would always say, Heather, your best thinking got you here. Think about that. Your head, your brain, your thought processes, your decision-making ability, that's what got you to AA. So you got to reprogram yourself.
Yeah.
And the only way you can do that is by listening to people that have more time than you, that can help you along the way. Because on your own, you're a disaster.
Yeah.
And she was right. I mean, I had a very hard time listening. I was very hard-headed. I was very stubborn. I kind of fought her along the way for the first 4 years. And then I made a drastic decision that radically changed my life for the negative in a lot of ways. And it was at that point that I said, you know what? I really don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I might be sober. I might be, you know, but that's the only thing I know how to do right.
Yeah.
The rest of this stuff, I have no idea. And that really at 4 years was when I said, okay, I have to find out what's really going on with me. I have to find out why I do the things I do. I have to, you know, I've got to get it together. You know, at that point I had a son, my son, Chuck. He was he was an infant, and we were in a very dangerous, precarious position because of a decision I had made in a marriage relationship. And it was at that point that I thought, I'm going to screw this kid up, just like my parents screwed me up if I don't get my shit together.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And I went on a journey of healing and therapy and self-discovery, and you know, it's still going on to this day. You know, sobriety has not been a joyride for me. I've been through a lot of things in my time sober. You know, I've been through the death of my younger brother. That just about, I mean, that was devastating. He died of cancer. I was 7 years sober when that happened. I went through homelessness at 4 years with my son. We went into a domestic violence shelter. Oof. That was devastating. You know, I met and married my husband in Indianapolis, thank God. When I was, I met him at 7 years. He had 3 years at the time. It's a long time ago. So he has 28 years now, I think. Wow. So, you know, but we had a blended family. That was difficult. We were in the Navy. We moved every 3 years. That was difficult. You know, my ex-husband showed up at some point, and that was really difficult. And that was very traumatic for the whole family. You know, and I've stayed sober through all of that. But it's not been, staying sober hasn't been hard for me. I don't want to sound, you know, Pollyanna-ish about it But living through life, real life, in all of its struggles and pains and trauma, living through that without drugs and alcohol, without doing stuff to make it better, you know what I mean? Living through it in reality, wide awake, with your real feelings, that's what's hard.
Oh, yeah.
That's what's hard. And I think that's, you know, and that's why having a really, really good, strong, solid, concrete foundation in some kind of program, you know, at this point in this day and age, whatever that program is to you, but having some kind of a program, having support from other sober people, having somebody that's older than you, that's been sober longer than you, that can help you along the way. Because I work in recovery in two different fashions, and I go into treatment centers and I listen to younger people that are getting out of treatment, and they're like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, but, and it's like, you know, without that strong, solid foundation with somebody to help you and guide you along the way, and somebody to talk to when you're in a sticky place or you feel like, you know, I just can't take this anymore. Without having that, it's hard.
Yeah.
Life is hard. And if I didn't have all that, I don't know if I could have stayed sober through all of the things I've stayed sober through. And, you know, so what I always say is you can stay sober through anything, honestly. It's just whether or not you have the support system and the foundation and the determination to do so. There were lots of times that I wanted to drink. There were lots of times that I wanted to smoke weed. Lots of times. But I knew it wouldn't help anything. You know, I knew it would make things much worse than they already were. I knew it wouldn't fix anything. It would give me temporary relief from my emotions, but that's all it would do.
Yeah.
So, you know, my real story is just how to get through real life without using. And, you know, we went through a 10-year struggle with my son. He's 27 now, and he had undiagnosed mental illness and drug addiction. He was homeless. It was a terrible, terrible time in our lives, and he's been clean now for 2 years. But that just about killed me, you know, going through that as a mom, watching my son just self-destruct like that. But I didn't use, but I about did myself in. I won't lie.
Yeah.
But you know, that's propelled me in different directions. You know, that trauma, that terrible nightmare, that's what sent me in the direction I'm in now, which is, you know, I'm a family peer recovery coach, and I help families impacted by addiction. Because I know what it feels like now to watch a loved one, you know, suffer. And I never knew what that felt like before. And I do now, fortunately or unfortunately. And, you know, the families out there, there's so many families out there that are struggling, that are hurting, that are desperate, that are hopeless.
Oh, yeah. They
don't know what to do. And, it's given me an opportunity to take my experience, strength, and hope in that area and help. And then on the other side of it, I work for a company helping people coming out of treatment with aftercare options. So for years and years, I didn't want to work in the recovery field because my sponsor said, don't, I won't use her language, but she basically don't crap where you eat, was what she always said.
Yeah.
But I've, you know, gotten to a point now where, you know, my daughter, the one who has, I said to you, had autism, she's 22 now, and all the other kids, there's 4 of them, they're all adults and don't live at home, and I have time on my hands, and there's so much work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And there's so many people that are suffering, and if I can give back in some way, if I can help in some way, then I really feel honored to do that. My son's situation really, it created a deep, deep compassion in my heart. for people that were addicted. It
Yeah.
created that in my heart for the homeless population. And I thought I was compassionate prior to watching my son go through this, but I really wasn't. You know, I could talk a good game about the opioid epidemic and people that were overdosing and dying and how terrible it was and, you know, all of this stuff. But when it happened to us, you know, it broke my heart. And I think that was a good thing. I think my heart needed to be broken because I now know what that feels like. And I want to help those people because those people were my son at one point. So, you know, that's not my total, I guess, my why I drank and how I got sober story, but I think there's a lot of those stories out there. There are, you know, so many people that can tell a good sobriety, you know, what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. You hear them all the time. So this is just where I'm at today, and still in the trenches and still, you know, recovering from things myself. I don't think the journey really ever ends.
Yeah. All right. Well, we definitely have some questions for you. Carly, would you like me to go first?
Yes, I would.
Oh, perfect. That's great. You said you got clean at a young age, and there were like a couple people sort of around your age, and it's very difficult for young people to really compare in to the rooms. So what really helped you at that young age compare in when you're dealing with people who are a lot older than you and not necessarily in the same life situation? So how did you really buy in and stick and stay?
Well, my sponsors told me right from the get-go, she said, don't listen to their stories. Okay. Don't listen to what happened to them. Listen to their feelings. Listen to how they felt. Listen to the emotions as they went through things. Those are what you have in common. She said, when someone can be, at the time, someone can be 55 and they can say, I never felt like I fit in. I've always felt lonely. I've always felt, you know, unloved, unwanted. And she would say, it doesn't matter what the story was behind that. It matters what the feeling was. And that's what you can relate to. And that's what I always listened for, you know, and that's what gave me buy-in initially, that and desperation, honestly. I mean, the buy-in initially was desperation and what my sponsor was telling me. I did not want that old life anymore. I didn't know how to not have it. But this woman was telling me she could help me. And nobody had really helped me before. You know, I love my parents, but my parents were really hands off is a nice way to put it. And this woman was about my mom's age, and she said, I will wrap my arms around you. I'm going to be very strict, but I will help you. And I'd never had that before. And I wanted it. I wanted what she had. I wanted what the other people in the rooms had. I saw people that were in their 30s that were married with kids. I wanted that. I didn't think I'd ever get it. You know, I didn't think I was capable of having that kind of a nice life, but I wanted it. So, you know, it wasn't, for me, that's just where I was coming from. And I think a lot of the people I got sober with that were in that age range. I think that was a lot of what, you know, was the motivator is I want what you have. And I want the life you have. Eventually, at someday, I want the life that you have now. And, you know, I got sober in Annapolis, Maryland. There's a huge recovery community there. There's 5 meetings a night, you know, 15 on Saturday and Sunday. There's meetings everywhere. And it's a very well-connected group of people. They socialize together, all of that kind of thing. So it was a sense of belonging. You know, it was for the first time I had friends that actually cared about me, that just didn't want something from me. Some of the guys did, to be honest, but
that's guys. That's guys everywhere.
But you know what I mean? For the first time, I had a group that I belonged to, and they didn't think I was weird. You know, they were all like me, and I was like, I had no idea there were other people like me that thought the way I did and did things like I did. I mean, it was amazing to me.
All right. Well, what you got, Carly?
So a lot in recovery, we talk about like the powerlessness. And we're definitely powerless over others and their using. So how did you navigate helping your son?
Well, initially I went to Al-Anon, which is a great program, and I'm still a member of that today. And that helped me a lot. It helped me a lot, but there wasn't really a lot that I had learned in the 12 steps over the years that was helping me know how to help my son. And so I had to find other avenues of how do you reach somebody? How do you talk to somebody? How do you communicate with somebody? You know, I had no healthy boundaries at all. Like, you know, you talk about enabling, and I don't know that it's necessarily enabling. It's just you're so desperate to help because you don't know what else to do. And you're trying anything and everything. You know, so we didn't have boundaries with him, and we were trying to allow for natural consequences of his actions, and it was very difficult. And so I got involved in learning about craft, which is a technique for family members to change the conversation with their family members. And eventually I took a certification course in family peer recovery coaching, and I learned that I'm powerless over the substances, but I was not powerless over how I behaved with my son. I was not powerless over how I talked to him. I was not powerless over how we handled boundaries and natural consequences. Those were things I had control over, and those were things I could change, and those were things I did change. And you know, I had not learned those things in the rooms, because in the rooms you learn you can't control it, you can't cure it, you didn't cause it. You know, you just wait and hope and sit on your hands and pray and, you know, hope they hit bottom. And you know, that just wasn't working for me as mom at all. I was like, you're telling me I got to sit and wait and hope that I don't get a call from a police officer that he's dead? Ooh. No, I'm not doing that. And so I learned how to do motivational interviewing with him, for instance, just different things. And we changed completely the way we were interacting with our son, with 360, the way my husband and I were interacting with him. And thank God it worked.
Yeah.
And it gave me some measure of feeling like I did have there were things I could do. I wasn't completely powerless in this situation. But I did have to turn all of it over to God, you know, ultimately, because, you know, I'm not him.
All right. What question am I going to go with? So you talked about like dealing with your mental health, because that was really like a root cause of like using an addiction. So how have you addressed that mental health in recovery? Like what have you had to do to get where you are today?
I've been in and out of therapy off and on over the years. I've had a lot of good therapists. I have been involved in group therapy, where I've been with other women that have been through things that are similar to myself. We're led by a facilitator who could help us process, you know, things that have happened to us. I work very closely with my physician regarding medication, because I do need medication to manage my mental health. And so I, you know, my sponsor told me early on, I can help you with the 12 steps and I can do all of that, but I'm not a therapist. And so she sent me to someone that she knew that was a therapist that was in Al-Anon. So she would speak, you know, she spoke the lingo and would understand a lot of what I was going through. And I think I was about a year sober at that point. And that therapist said to me, you know, you have some very, very deep-seated trauma, and I don't think we're going to be able to address it without you going to the doctor and asking for medication.
Mm.
Because it threw me into a horrible depression, and she was, worried that could trigger a relapse. And so, off and on over the years, I've worked with people, and I'm currently in trauma therapy. I've since about 2 years ago, right before my son got clean or went into treatment, I started EDMR therapy. I don't know if you all know what that is,
mm-hmm.
but and that's been incredibly healing. It's probably the best type of therapy I've ever done for myself, and it's really helped me deal with some things that I could not have dealt with before now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still at it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Carly.
A
little bit raspy this morning.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. How have you stayed connected in recovery throughout the pandemic?
Through the pandemic?
Mm-hmm.
Really just over the phone, over text, over Instagram.
Yep.
Sending things to friends and family. I have a Zoom account, a lot of phone conversations. I'm actually an introvert, but I play an extrovert on TV. So, the pandemic hasn't really been, it wasn't too bad to be isolated in our homes. My husband is an extreme introvert, and so is my daughter. So none of us were too upset about not being able to leave.
Yeah. Eric was in his dream world. He was like, yes, I get to stay home.
Yeah, that was my daughter. She was like, I have an excuse not to ever leave again. She was thrilled about it. But yeah, just like my Al-Anon meeting, we went to Zoom meetings. So we were meeting every week on the computer. Same thing with some AA meetings. I joined that website, intherooms.com. I don't know if you guys know about that one or not, but that had a lot of online meetings. And of course, I live with someone in recovery. My mom's in recovery. My son now is in recovery. So there were lots and lots of phone calls and, various messaging through social media.
Mm-hmm. I got a couple questions. So the first one's going to be a fun one. So you spent a good amount of time on the East Coast, and you spent a good amount of time in the Midwest. I know, my brain was like blah. What are some like funny or weird differences between the East Coast and the Midwest?
Well, and we also did 10 years in San Diego too.
Okay.
Ooh, all right. So
Connecticut and
you've been everywhere.
Those are the main ones. Virginia, we lived 10 years in Virginia too. So we've lived on both coasts in different locations, and then we retired here to the Midwest.
Okay. Compare all three: East Coast, West Coast, and Midwest.
East Coast. Are you talking about as far as like recovery stuff or people, or
just
in
people?
General.
Just in general. With some weird things, but like that are different.
On the East Coast, people are, they can be standoffish.
Okay.
And
that's a nice way to put it.
Yeah, and a little bit hard to get to know. There can be kind of that wall up that you get with people. In San Diego, I found my experience was people were very nice when we got there.
Yes.
I mean, I was shocked. So I remember being in the grocery store the first day we were there, and I was about 3 months pregnant, and I was showing, and there was a man in front of me and a lady behind me in line, and I was exhausted. We'd been on the road for like 10 days going across country, and I said something about being tired, and all the cashier and both the people in front and back said, "Oh, do you need help to your car? Do you want us to help you get your stuff to the car?" And I was like, what do you
want? Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, what's your angle? Are you plotting on me? Like, what's up?
Yeah.
And I was shocked at how just like open and friendly they were. And I personally found that to be the case with a lot of people in San Diego. Now, my husband worked up in LA. I had my sister and brother-in-law lived up in Orange County, which is outside of Los Angeles, and just kind of an open, sunny disposition. Now, the closer you get to the wealthier areas, that changes.
Yes. I can imagine.
That changes a lot. Virginia, boy, we did 10 years in California and then 10 years in Southern Virginia. And it was like the Twilight Zone.
Oh, yes.
My kids, by this point, my son was, he was going into 8th grade, and my daughter was going into 3rd. And my son, 8th grade is like that. You're cool, you got your friends.
Yeah.
And, you're starting to, really think about getting a girl. And he was like, where the hell have you moved us to?
Yep.
Like,
yeah, that's a rude awakening.
Yeah. People, so rude.
Yep.
So rude.
Yeah.
My son's biracial. He's from my first marriage. He's biracial. Very racist there. I found racism against myself because I'm white and I had a mixed child. He found racism because he wasn't black enough. I mean, it was very challenging to live there for him, which did not help his issues that he already had. We eventually were stationed in a little town where the people were very nice and very friendly, but still kind of cold. I don't know how else to put it. Yeah. And very. Now I'm, disclosure alert. I am a Christian. I'm a born again Christian. Okay. I'm not affiliated with any denomination, and I like to think I'm not a weirdo. But they're in Virginia, very religious.
Yes.
Like.
Yeah, that's
legalistically religious in Virginia.
That's
to the point where it's
side
like
of the Bible Belt. Yep.
Oh yeah, it's like
holy rollers.
Kind of weird.
I said holy rollers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just a lot of that's all I'm going to say about that.
All right.
And then we moved to Indiana, southern Indiana. The people are incredibly friendly here. They're incredibly nice.
I've only ever driven through Indiana. I've never actually stopped there, maybe for gas.
Well, you should drive through the southern part of the state, because the southern part of the state is beautiful. The mid part of the state and stuff, that's all like flat and corn and flat and more corn. But if you get down into the southern, if you get into the southern part of the state where we live, it's mountainous. There's some great parks for hiking and things like that. We live near a little town called Nashville, Indiana. It's beautiful. So yeah, it's really pretty here, and the people are incredibly friendly and nice. And but I'm from here originally, so I can say this. You do get some people with rebel flags and things of that nature.
That's
so
everywhere.
it's not as friendly to people of color, I'll say. That's a nice way of saying it. So, but other than that, it's been a good move for us, and we're happy here. So
nice. All right.
The recovery community here is not that built up. There's not a lot where we live. I guess in Indianapolis it probably is, but not where we live.
All right. Well, everybody who's listening, you just got a nice tour of America, so you're welcome. All right, Carly.
I can tell you about Connecticut too. Those people we lived in Connecticut, and those people are very.
Oh, everybody in the northeast is shady.
Yeah.
From Maryland on up, we're just shady. We're weird. I don't know. It's just the way
I worked when I was in Annapolis, Maryland. I worked basically down in DC for an insurance company as a sales rep, and my territory was New York. And I was like, oh God, you're gonna make me work with those people.
And we still love you, Northeast. We're shady. I mean, we're part
we
of
do.
it.
I loved my customers, and but it's hard to break in, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because there's almost like a distrust of strangers there.
Yes.
So.
And for anybody who's listening, like why I asked that question is just because and we've had people from all over the world on here, and it's just quirky to hear the little differences in people And some of them are really funny, and some of them are really true. Like, like the way you said it, like what we normally get, like people in like the Maryland and Northeast are like, "You guys are really rude," and it's like, "Yeah, sorry." We're like, we're super sarcastic, and a lot of it's like tongue in cheek. Like we're not actively like hating on you, but I don't know. We're weird people, but it's a fun question to ask.
I personally think it has to do with, you live in cities. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of crowding. There's, a fight for resources, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I think, people that live there come from kind of harder stock. And there's a lot of, when you talk about places like New York, those cities have been built on different populations of people that have come from all over the world.
And you got to be tough.
Yeah. And so there's some of that. I respect that. It's just hard as a sales rep. It was hard to break into that territory.
I'm sure. All right, Carly, what do you got?
I don't know. You said you had like a bunch of questions, so you want to just keep going?
Well, that one went long, so I was going to pass it to you.
So you said so you're in recovery, your mom's in recovery, your husband's in recovery, your son's in recovery. Is it difficult at all to like stay in your own lane and not like put your hands in their program? And do you see it happening like on the flip side with them and you?
That's a great question. And it used to be hard for me to stay in my own lane because I had what I call a fix-it problem. This idea that if anyone was upset, if anyone was hurting, if anyone needed help or advice, it was my job to fix it. It was my job to make everything better. It was my job to make everybody feel good, for everything to always be nice. And so, it was hard to stay in my own lane because, if somebody was upset, I had to get in there and I had to help them because, that was my job. And it wasn't until I started going to Al-Anon when my son really was crashing and burning that I learned that that wasn't my job at all. I didn't have to do that at all. I could, figure out their own problems and their own solutions.
Yeah.
And that I could mind my own business. And yes, it might be painful for them. It might be incredibly painful for them, like it was with my son. When I stopped saying, I don't know, honey, but you'll figure it out. And he'd say, but Mom, I'm sleeping outside tonight and it's 30 degrees. And I'd say, I'm sorry, honey, I can get you to a homeless shelter or I can help you get into treatment. I love you and I'm really sorry. And he'd say, I don't want to do either of those things. And then I'd have to say, well, I'm sorry, you're going to have to figure it out. I mean, that's staying in your own lane hard, and it was very difficult to do.
Yeah.
I hope she's not listening, but my mother has a horrible time staying in her own lane. She just, I don't know, she just has a really difficult time minding her own business. And that's been very challenging for me because I'm an adult and I don't need a mommy.
Yeah.
And that's been challenging. So I've learned over the years how to set boundaries with her, and I've had to set very hard boundaries with her. As I've gotten older and as I've learned more, I've had to really, be kind of hard about boundaries with my mom. And that was very difficult because I didn't grow up having any boundaries with my mother. But I have them now, and it's made my life a lot more peaceful. I know she doesn't necessarily enjoy it, but again, she has to figure that out. It's not my job to fix that for her.
Yeah.
My husband, he always stays in his own lane. He's career military. Right. His dad was career military. He's like, figure it out, not my problem. I love you guys, but I'm going to the garage to work on a project, and hope you guys live. That's my husband.
That works.
Yeah, I mean, he's very good at staying out of everyone's business. He's, it's not that he doesn't care. It's just that he's like, it's not my problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that answer. That's actually one of my favorite answers in life, when it genuinely does not like pertain to me at all. I can just be like, oh, well, that's not my fucking problem. You
I mean, with our kids,
out.
he's a little softer with our children.
Yeah.
We've got four kids between us, so he's softer with our children, but not a lot softer.
Mm-hmm. Hey, sometimes that's what's needed. All right.
You know, I've had to remind him over the years, you know, like, this is not a Navy command here. This is the house. We live here. You know, I know you're used to being in charge, but we're not in boot camp. So if you could tone it down a little bit.
That's funny. All right. So my final question is, all right, if you have to pick only one, what is your favorite step and why?
Step 3.
Yes, called it. That's mine too.
Well, that's a hard question.
It's difficult.
Step 2 and 3 go together in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, turning, you know, your will and your life over, admitting that you need, you know, that only a higher power can fix you.
Mm-hmm.
But seeking after whatever your higher power's will for you is each day. Because one of the hardest things that I struggled with in the beginning was just staying in the day.
Yep.
And just, you know, okay, what is it that you have for me to do today? What is it in front of me to do today? And I think the third step, that's a lot of what the third step is trying to get you to learn, you know, is that you depend on your higher power one day at a time. And you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And so build my life, Mom. And I'd say you rebuild it one day at a time.
Mm-hmm.
You do the next right thing, and day by day your life will get better. And he'd say, yeah, but I don't know how I'm ever going to get a job with these tattoos. And I'd say, when that time is right, that time will present itself. You're not there today. Yep. That's not where you're at today.
Yep.
Today you're right here. You know, you're in treatment. You're going to your groups. You're going to your therapy. That's what you're doing today.
Mm-hmm.
Seek your higher power. He'll help you out. The rest is unwritten yet. Yeah,
totally. I totally agree, and I know Eric heard that because he's a step 10 guy, and I had a personal tally going between step 3 and step 10, and so far I'm totally
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Which one's your favorite?
3. I go with step 3 as well. So he was like,
okay, well, we have to be best friends on social media then.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll definitely like, share, subscribe. Totally.
I already have.
Oh, I know, and we will return the favor. Do you have any more questions, Carly?
Nope, I'm good to go.
All right. Well, we would like to thank our guest Heather for joining us today. Woo! Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. It was really my pleasure to talk to you. I hope whoever's listening got something out of it. That's whenever I speak on a podcast. That's really my hope.
Yeah.
Is that somebody listening hears something and it resonates with them and it helps them in some way.
Totally. And we want to give you one last quick minute to talk to anybody out there directly listening, struggling, needing to hear that little oomph in their recovery. What do you have to say to them?
Just that it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not impossible to get sober and stay sober. I know when it's, day 1 or day 30, it can seem impossible.
Mm-hmm.
It can seem like you look at somebody that has a year or 2 years or 10, and you think, how does somebody do that? I can't imagine doing that. I couldn't either.
Yep.
At day 1, if you had told me day 1, someday you're going to be sitting in your log cabin in the middle of the woods in Indiana and you're going to be doing a podcast and you're going to have 31 years, I would have said, shut up.
Yep.
You are the biggest liar I've ever heard in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to follow directions.
Mm-hmm.
You have to follow directions. That's the biggest thing. And I would tell that to families too when I work with families. You have to follow directions. If you have someone who is trying to help you, whether that's a counselor or a group therapist or a sponsor, a friend, a loving family member, someone who's loving, let's preface that,
mm-hmm.
and they're trying to help you, listen
Yep.
to them. take what they're saying in and listen and follow directions, because they're really trying to help you. And you don't have to do this alone. You know, there's tons of support out there. And I know now it's kind of hard with meetings, sometimes still aren't meeting live, but you know, you can connect online with people. You can reach out to people on Instagram that have sober accounts. There's thousands and thousands of them. You know, you can go to intherooms.com and go to meetings. You don't have to be alone in trying to stay sober.
Yep.
There's a lot of help out there if you want it. And that's a big part of it too. You have to want it.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks again. And here at Podcast Recovery, we are aiming to expand the scope of support for recovering addicts. Accessibility and convenience of helpful services is paramount to combating addiction. We work to bring the message of recovery to every addict, wherever and whenever it is needed. We believe that a powerful voice of recovery should be obtainable, practical, and at the touch of a button. Every addict deserves to hear a message of hope, and Podcast Recovery is here to provide it. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us. Like we just said, go to our Instagram, our Facebook, our Twitter, our YouTube channel, like, share, subscribe. We are self-supporting, so please become part of the Podcast Recovery family and join our Patreon to help us keep the mics on. And Heather, if you wouldn't mind, where can our listeners find you?
My website is www.fullfamilyrecovery.com. So it's www.fullfamilyrecovery.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everybody again, but most importantly,
stay safe and stay clean.